With billions staying home due to the COVID-19 pandemic, human activity across the world has slowed to a standstill. The nonstop honking of cars weaving in and out of traffic has cleared. Gas prices have plunged as millions no longer make their daily commutes. And dense smog hovering over cities has made way for crisp blue skies. While some have felt helpless being stuck inside during this pandemic, it's had the fortunate side effect of helping our planet heal. But more importantly, it's helped us all feel the impact that nature can have on our lives, and hopefully wake us to the reality of other impending invisible threats like climate change.
The reason that climate change has taken so long to rise to an urgency level in people's consciousness and the conscience of the government and the private sector is we haven't taken it seriously enough. And I think the public health crisis that we're facing today shows just how real and visible threats can be. And now we can see that, science is real. Science is truth. And, we base things on truthful scenarios. And when you look at science that way, we've said, okay, maybe we can all just do little things and that will make a difference. And we have time to do that. Well, the clock is running out.
That's Thomas Kostigen, journalist and author of Hacking Planet Earth, How Geoengineering Can Help Us Reimagine the Future. Kostigen is right, the time is running out. The world is currently on a trajectory of a 3 to 4 degrees Celsius rise by 2100, according to a 2018 report by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. While that may seem like an insignificant change, this small uptick in global temperature can lead to disastrous consequences.
Global temperature rise is a real thing. It may be an invisible threat, much like the coronavirus, but it's a real thing and is increasingly landing at our front doors. So just to kind of continue with that analogy, when we start to get a fever, that's our body telling us things are out of whack. And that's not a very high degree of change in our body's temperature. It's a few degrees of temperature rise. If you look at just a 1.5 degree temperature rise for the planet, we'll have chronic heat waves of Saharan intensity. We'll have the Amazon rainforest, which are the lungs of the planet. They create so much oxygen from the trees there. They will collapse. There will be wildfires there. Just on that little bit of degree change, glaciers that we've seen melt will melt exponentially faster and exponentially wider in scope.
Human activity emits 42 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere each year. These heat-trapping gas emissions contribute to rising temperatures, resulting in higher sea levels and more extreme weather patterns. If humans continue on this path, stronger hurricanes, longer droughts, and more intense heat waves will all be part of the new normal.
Countries that are typically arid are going to have really difficult times getting water. Countries that don't have access to food won't be able to grow any type of food. So it really is what they call a threat accelerator when we talk about climate change, with the problems that countries have today and in the future will just accelerate those problems.
Global emergencies like the COVID-19 pandemic have disproportionately affected the lives of those in lower income brackets, who are hit harder by economic uncertainty. And unfortunately, climate change is no different in that regard. According to Kostigen, as many as 1 billion people could become climate change refugees by 2050.
We're looking at places that are experiencing extreme heat or extreme droughts, seeing those people actually leave and become climate refugees. Same thing with floods. We've seen this throughout Asia over the last couple of years. People leave certain Asian countries to go to other places. So we need to take this seriously, and we need to pay particular attention to people who don't have the same opportunities that we have in the developed world for embracing these technologies and putting them into practice simply because they haven't had the same infrastructure luck that we have.
In the U.S., for decades, we've heard about the looming threats of global warming in some form or another. Often the facts and figures can sound quite apocalyptic. But Kostigen wants listeners to view this issue with more of a solutions-based mindset.
We've gone through the preventative measures with mitigation, turning off the lights when we leave a room, turning down the thermostat, stopping our cars from idling. But there are other technologies that can affect the climate much more quickly. And that's what's so exciting and hopeful.
These technologies are innovative geoengineering feats that go past the reduce, reuse, and recycle mentality. So, what is geoengineering exactly? Put simply, it's about using emerging technologies in the private sector to directly counter the effects of climate change. In his new book, Kostigen highlights some of the futuristic ideas created by entrepreneurs, engineers, scientists, and industry disruptors, all working together toward this one goal. One such idea focuses on electrical power generation. Currently, 2/3 of power in the U.S. still comes from coal and fossil-related fuels, and globally, this number is about the same.
If you look at solar energy transmission from, say, the Sahara Desert to Europe, and those transmission lines, which are being laid down more efficient, we have a real game changer when it comes to taking the largest capture of energy on the planet, the Sahara Desert, putting solar panels on top of that, and then transmitting that energy to more populated areas around the globe. Specifically, I'm talking about not just northern Africa, but also the Middle East, so the MENA region, and then now into Europe.
And this idea can be implemented in places across the globe, like the Mojave Desert in California and Nevada. But finding efficient power isn't the most immediate problem we face. Right now, melting ice glaciers pose a massive challenge as rising sea levels threaten to wipe out islands and coastal cities across the globe. In Greenland, ice covers 80% of the country's landmass, which is more than 3 times the size of Texas. Kostigen says that if Greenland's ice melted, global sea levels would rise 24 feet. To counteract this, a group of scientists are trying to geoengineer glaciers to keep these masses frozen for longer. A couple methods being tested are artificial steel embankments or man-made islands that, in short, block warming and slow erosion. And not only do these projects seek to stop glaciers from melting, but they've also tried to make better use of changing freshwater systems.
Basically, what has been done is an entrepreneur figured out that okay, there's a lot of melt from the glaciers, and increasingly so. How can we stave that melt? And then at the same time, because climate change is causing spring to come earlier in many places, that melt is wasted on the agricultural people who farm the land and the possibilities there for using that water to grow food when they need it most later in the season. So the ice stupas basically take a pipe and spray water up into the air. And it's so cold at those elevations that water freezes and creates almost like a stovepipe oven and stays that way longer. But it also, when things do start to melt, provides a more ready source of water at the right time of the growing season when the agricultural communities need it most, rather than earlier in the season when it just goes to waste.
While you might think that these inventions are far-fetched and grandiose, the innovation behind these ideas is exactly the kind of thinking we need to combat global warming. As millions become more aware of the invisible enemies lurking in our world, it's up to the private sector and people everywhere to take action instead of waiting for government entities to act. To find out more about geoengineering, read Thomas Kostigen's new book, Hacking Planet Earth: How Geoengineering Can Help Us Reimagine the Future, available on Amazon.com. You can learn more about Kostigen and all of our guests by visiting our website at viewpointsradio.org. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price. Coming up on Viewpoints.
Not everyone understands that this pig ate acorns for 8 months.
The laborious production process for some high-end ingredients. Then,
we're told every day, mostly on the internet, that you can't pronounce the name of a chemical. It must automatically be bad for you.
A chemist's take on processed foods. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
And And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows. And find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.